Great. Just a quick introduction, really. I mean, it sounds like everybody already knows Steve, but just for those who haven't met him yet, to just say a few words. I'm Anna, by the way, and I'm really delighted to be here today and to introduce this Lunchtime Talk, part of our Food for Thought series, a monthly space for reflection and debate about our work at the Institute and any related work, together with our associates and partners and others who are interested. Yeah, so very warm welcome. It's really lovely to see so many people joining us today and from so many different places, as we have already heard. And of course, welcome to our speaker, Stephen Cady, who is Professor of Management, and he's the founding director of the doctoral program in Organization Development and Change at Bowling Green State University. He is currently serving on the editorial board for Public Integrity and has previously served on a number of boards, including the International Society for Organization Development and Change. And he's also written over 30 journal publications and books, and is the founder of Nexus for Change, a global network of collaborative change professionals. Today, Stephen will be talking about his latest research, really exciting, which is looking at 6 global indices and creating a mashup of different parts to offer an integration of people, planet, and profit related to change. So he will take us through some of the history of the development of the indices and take a critical view of that, and then also present 2 possible new indices coming out of that, and invite us to discuss these. So we're really, really glad to have you here with us today. Just to say, I'm a quantitative researcher and I'm looking a lot at sort of indices and scales, more so related to sort of the individual level. So I think it's a really fascinating topic, and I'm really excited to hear more about it, what you've been finding out with your research so far. Also to note that this talk will be quite interactive, so you're very welcome to respond as you've already been doing through the chat, but also through speaking, and let's just even know your thoughts and ideas. There will be also breakout sessions in small groups, which we will be introducing later, and a space afterwards for a whole group discussion. Just a little bit about housekeeping. Please mute yourself unless you're speaking, and we will be recording this talk, as you will have seen, which will be available on our brand new website over the next few weeks. Look out for lunchtime talks. If you have any concerns about the recording, please contact my colleague, Emily. Emily, maybe you just wave. Yes, that's Emily, thank you. And that's it from me. We will be finishing at 2:30 today. So back to you, Steve. Sorry, Steve, I think you're muted. You're muted if you're speaking.
Yeah, I'm just sharing my screen now and kind of getting things up here so I can see everybody. So just take a second. You should see my screen and putting the controls over here. So I see them there. Great. So awesome. So everybody see my screen okay? Okay, great. Great. All right. So again, welcome and thank you all for being here. I am very blessed to be in Bowling Green, Ohio. I live in Perrysburg on a farm with my family, 3 boys, my wife, grandparents live across the yard. The boys farm with their grandpa. We have chickens, and everybody likes my chickens now because chicken egg prices have gone way up. And I love teaching at Bowling Green State University. It's one of the best universities in our country, and our college, Schmidt-Horst College of Business, is where I teach in the doctorate in organization development and change. I was also very fortunate to be founder of that program 3 years ago. And it's a doctorate, it's a professional doctorate for people who are busy and want to get a doctorate and develop their thought leadership and transforming organizations and revitalizing communities and developing human potential. And I'm really proud of them. They're great human beings, and it's a wonderful program, great faculty. And I'm just really blessed with that. And All Things Change is a podcast sponsoring this, along with the Collaborative Change Library, The Best Methods. It's a digital library of over 100 methods for transforming organizations collaboratively. And the Nexus for Change is a community gathering space for that work. And I'm really grateful to the Tavistock Institute. I'm a big fan, have been for many, many years. It is one of the birthplaces of the social behavioral sciences, one of the most important organizations in our world, particularly today. and the work that they're doing is really important. And I get to bring our doctoral students over, and we get to do work over there as a part of our doctoral program. We go to the VU, the Free University of Amsterdam, then go over to London, and we go to Paris, and in London we learn about the social behavioral sciences and action research, and in Paris we learn about sustainable development goals, the Paris Agreement, and global sustainable change, and how we can bring so many countries together to make that agreement. So there's a lot in the program, a lot I'm grateful for, a lot of people that have helped me be here today. The focus of this is the future of humanity and report. And I've been playing with terms. You are a part of a focus group, if you will, because this is very preliminary. I'm looking to you all to like have fun with this. Think of this like we're in the laboratory and we're playing, we're throwing, like in the kitchen, we're throwing flour and we're throwing salt and we're throwing this around, pasta, and we're cutting stuff up and we're all jumping in, and we're drinking wine and we're having a great old time, right? And we're inventing something here. And I want you to be a part of that experimental mindset today. My purpose is to encourage dialogue that can advance a thriving, life-filled planet. Without life on this planet, we would be a rock. It would be a rock. And all life on this planet, we make it what it is today. And I'd love to do it in engaging dialogue. We're going to do it in 3 rounds. We have plenty of time. So, and we'll have round 1 will be about the big picture, the mashup design, preliminary results of the current future state of humanity, and a small group discussion. And I want you to know, I'm playing with everything from what to call stuff. I was calling it this and that just a few weeks ago and playing with stuff. And I saw a book by Michio Kaku and the future of humanity. And I was looking at other stuff around the word humanity. And I was thinking, what am I really trying to do? And so that's where I'm coming with this notion of this being a future of humanity report. And I'll talk more about why I think that name does capture that. But we have also met titles of these indices, the different measures, what to call them and things like that, all the way through to how to do them. Please know it's all open for discussion and for you to give your ideas and thoughts. So we'll do round 1 looking at that. And then we'll go into small breakouts, and you all will reflect in your groups and then come back and share that. And then we'll come back for round 2, and I'll talk about the country rankings. And I'll show you the rankings and how the change over time over 5 years, and we'll look at that. And then we'll go back into some discussion. And then round 3, we'll come back and I'll talk about just the preliminary qualitative document analysis that I'm doing. And what's important here is that the people who put these composite indices together are incredibly passionate, talented, experienced, smart people in their area. And they've written these thoughtful, critical reflections about the results of their particular composite index that they put out. And I'm curious, what is the connection, the meta connection between those indexes and the reports? What are they saying? And so I've begun the process of qualitatively analyzing the documents, a specific process. I'm going to share with you some very preliminary themes that I've seen across the reports. And then we'll go into small group discussion, and then we'll come back and debrief on that. And so I want to say thank you to Michelle and Elsie Godwell, my GA, plus many other GAs, Chris Rump and Gavin Schwartz. I want to say thank you to them. There's been a group of people working with me on this. It's a slowly emerging group. It's an open invitation. If you find yourself really wanting to be a part of this and getting your hands dirty with this and being a part of that, I welcome people who have the passion and the skills and the commitment to working together in a collaborative fashion. So just let me know. I welcome that. And I'm really grateful to this group of people here who have been working with me on this. As I said, this is all in a state of flux. And what I mean by that is we are really kind of at that starting place of trying to figure out how best to put this together, how to analyze, and how we might actually leverage the wisdom in all of these composite indices and how we can leverage it in a way to be useful. So we really are learning right now. And so let's jump into round 1, the big picture. And what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about mashup designs, and I'm going to talk a bit about the preliminary results from the current and future state. I'm going to engage you in what it's called chatterfall. Does anybody who's got their cameras on knows what chatterfall is? Anybody know what chatterfall is? No? So what is Chatterfall? Chatterfall is, I'm going to ask you to type an answer to a question, but don't hit enter. And then at some point I'll say, go ahead, hit enter, boom, and in the chat, like a waterfall, a chatterfall comes down. And I'll ask you other questions. If you have questions that are coming up right now, if you want to say hi to somebody, if you want to have a conversation on the side in chat, that's fine. If you want to raise a question, I'll bring you in live to talk live. And it's wide open for us to have really good open discussion here. So let's jump in. I've began this by just thinking, like I saw one report, I thought, oh, that's an interesting report, the Human Development Index, that's interesting. Wow, and I started reading it, wow, that's pretty fascinating. And then like a year later, and this is like 10 years ago or so, another report I heard about, like the happiness report, right? The World Happiness Report, and ranking countries on the happiness. And then I saw another one on on economic development, or another one on economic freedom, or another one on global innovation, and another one on peace. And I started seeing all these, and I was like, wow, these are really. But I saw hundreds, and I went in and I started just scanning like indices, and I started just looking at them all, and like, wow, there are hundreds of these, and what they're called are composite. There's indexes, like a very specific scientific one where you're looking at a specific set of measures. And then there are these other ones that are called composite ones that are a little bit broader. They pick from, they have a theoretical framework to guide them, and they pull in these indices, and they're called mashup indices. And the ones I've been looking at are mashup indices and the critical reflection reports. And the reason is because they pull together these measures, create a ranking, and provide a reflective report. Now, what's interesting with all of that is it's hard to find ones that are unique in perspective and have a defined set of boundaries, consistently reported every year, that are evidence-based and good methodology behind them and that's shared. They're open source. There's a critical reflection on them with an assessment of the implications reported, and it's done by a think tank of credible people. So in the chat, don't hit enter. Let's play with Chatterfall for the first time. In the chat, if you were just to give a label like good, but different word than good, what would you call a composite index that has all of those qualities? How would you describe it? Not the title of it, but what would be your adjective for it? It is a what? Don't hit enter. I got to open up the chat here real quick so I can. There we go. Okay, on the count of three, we're going to see what the Chatterfall is. Ready? 1, 2, 3, hit enter. Boom. There's Chatterfall. Holistic, credible, ballpark, intriguing, full, tangible, universal, comprehensive, holistic, rigorous, imagine, collaboration, good. So right. So it was really hard to find that. And so there was, I think there was a sense of some type of universal spirit behind this, guiding me in some ways, because what came as I began to look at the ones that had that, it came down to a smaller list and a smaller list until it came to this list of 6 indices. And what's interesting is, as I was trying to figure out how to conceptually think about these, what popped up is a triple bottom line, approach, and thinking about the economic freedom, the index of economic freedom, and the global innovation index, addressing things that look at profit or performance in the world, or concrete performance in the world. The one Human Development Index and World Happiness Report looking at people, and then the planet, climate change, and peace. So that's my visual or my conceptual framework for thinking about these 6 that I ended up picking that met all of those criteria. And let me tell you, it's hard because a lot of them do it once every few years, and sometimes they do it for a little bit, then they go away, and sometimes you can't get the information, and so there's a lot of different things. But finding these 6 came out with those qualities. And the one thing I noticed was interesting, and when I look at the conversation and the dialogue out there, is that if you think of a hierarchy, a Gutman scale, if you will, in which, you got profit is the first focus, and then you can focus on people only if profit's taken care of. And then it says that you want to focus on the planet, you got to take care of people and profit first, and then the planet third. Now, that is where I think the planet has been today. This has been sort of the hierarchy. This is my judgment on this. And I would say that some people would argue, no, flip it, man. We need to really flip this in order to do this, right? We've got to focus on the planet, then people, and then profit in that hierarchy. And then, I would say that my thought is that I think it needs to really be focused on more of a look at the polarities and look at it as a balance. That's where the triple bottom line comes in. It doesn't say focus on one over the others. It's to take a balanced approach and really look at the three together and look at that tension. And, for those of you that work in dualism and dualities and polarities, know that there's the power and innovation that comes from allowing all three to exist and to work on all three at the same time. So that's kind of where we landed on them. And then what I did is, in taking those 6 reports, and I'm working on the 2021 reports. And so note that all reports come out and the data that they use is from the previous year. So be mindful of that, if I do a report on a year, so the 2021 reports, which I'm giving you the preliminary results from the Future of Humanity report for 2021, not 2023. So this is not the 2023, it's a 2021 report. And it reflects on the reports from 2021, which reflects on data from 2020. That's important for you all to keep in mind. And I've got all the data for 2022. I'll be working on that. And I'll be doing a 2022 report and then a 2023 report. So I'll have some history here in these reports as I put them out. The scores are normalized and adjusted. What does that mean? I put them all on a scale of 0 to 100. So for example, peace index is on a scale of 1 to 5. And I reversed it, did a percentage, and then turned it into a whole number. So it comes out so because 1 was good and 5 was bad in the peace index, so I needed to reverse it and then get it on a scale of to 100. So I did that with that one. So that's the kind of stuff I did to adjust the score. So they're all on a scale of 0 to 100. And then I calculated 2 calculations. And let me tell you, in talking with my colleagues and people there's all kinds of interesting calculations and things to look at. So today is all about you asking questions like, what about this? What about that? Try this, try that. But today I'm going to focus on the average, which I call the state of humanity, and also the change from 2016 to 2021. And I'm just going to focus on those 2 today, just as a starting point. And when I looked at the scores and got the average and so forth, what I found was that the scores will range between 30 to 90. And I started thinking about what's the way of calculating this or putting some qualitative labels on this and a subjective assessment, if you will. And you can think of it like surviving, dying, and thriving, that I figure between 30 and 50, you're dying. The score, the planet, we have an overall score for the planet plus scores by country. So it's in the dying range. 50 to 70 is surviving, 70 to 90 is thriving. So here's my question for you in the chat. Okay. I am curious, and I'm in here. I'm curious don't hit enter. What score would you give our planet entirety? If you take the 6 scores and you took the 6 scores that I showed you, they're all on a scale of 0 to 100 now, didn't weight any of them more than the other, equally weighted, calculated an average, what would you say is the score in 2021 of the average of all scores for all countries? And the countries that were evaluated it's approximately 47. And that's because that's the ones that were available on all of the indexes. And we can talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, 3, 2, 1, enter, boom. All right. The average came out to 62.33. The planet score, when I take the two and average them, it was 74.35, profit 56.38, and planet 56.26. So that's the different the sub dimensions, if you will, in there. All right. So now we're going to look at something next. Now let's look at change. How much did the planet change? How much did the planet change? Did it increase or decrease, and by how much do you think? What do you all think? Don't hit enter. Okay, 1, 2, 3, hit enter. Boom. Okay. Here we go. So there's where we're at. And here's where the score. It decreased by negative 0.37. Okay. So now, if we look at over time, you can see it's been the trend over for the three. You can just kind of see it over the years from 2016 to 2021. You can see that there. That's just a little thing. And it's I think it went down, down, up, down overall. So we're going to go into some breakout rooms now, and you're going to get a chance to meet somebody, make a new friend, and chat a little bit about in your groups, discuss what did you hear? What are your reactions to what you heard so far? And then what questions or ideas do you have? And we'll take about 7 minutes for that conversation, 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll come back. So up is going to pop on your screen, a breakout room, and you'll be able to jump for 5 minutes into conversation. We'll come back and we'll look next at the specific country ratings and the change by countries. We'll see which countries changed the most, positive and negative, and some other look at the rankings and stuff like that of countries. Go ahead and jump in your rooms. Okay. So we have a few people that are still here. They probably were stepped away, so that's all right. And it looks like I'm looking in the rooms. It looks like every room has at least 2 people in it. And so there's plenty of room for them to have discussion. So that'll be great. And for Yisham and Gemma and Alicia and Wallet, if you want to go to the rooms, and Catherine, if you're able to go to the rooms, or Catherine, you can stay here if you'd like. But if you want to go to your rooms, you can. But anyway, so I'll pause. So I'm curious, Anna, what are your reactions? What did you hear and what are your reactions?
Yeah, no, I think overall just at the end, the scoring just really, really intrigued me because, I was expecting it to be much lower than that. So, I'm just curious about sort of what are the sort of the different components that were sort of measured as part of this different indices. But no, that seems a bit, I don't know. Yeah.
What do you think, Rachel? What are your reactions?
My thought was,
I can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. We heard you. We heard you when you did that. I would unmute yourself, Rachel. It sounded great. Yeah.
Can
Sure.
you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
I can't hear him now.
So you need to now unmute your.
Just a-
Unmute, volume up. I think.
Just a second. Here we go. I had a thought that people, when they report things, they tend to be quite positive or more positive than negative. So I was wondering how that might skew the findings. I mean, that's like, people do that on an individual level. So I'm wondering if they do it on a country level as well, maybe, or, you know, there might be some reason why you might want to be more positive, you know, politically, a
Right.
political reason or something.
Right. One thing's for sure is it was positive, negative, different place. People were all over the place. Nobody really had, you know, it's right. There are lots of different ideas. Emily, what did you think?
Well, when it came to the like whole world, oh, you can't hear me, can you?
I'm gonna.
Round. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. When it came to this kind of whole world scoring, I think people tended on the low side, didn't they? Yeah, mostly. Yeah, so it's just interesting to see people are on the whole pessimistic. Did you just say the exact same thing?
No, I kind of said well, I said the opposite, but I said maybe the original reporting is more positive. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what questions come up? What's a question? What would, if you were to say, hey, I would do this different, or a question or a suggestion, what's coming up for you? To make it useful, to make this something that would be helpful.
I think it is already helpful. I think
How
what's
so?
interesting.
Yeah, how is it helpful?
Well, I think the interesting part for me is the fact that we're learning, well, I suppose we're learning here. I don't know if it's the same outside of this group of people, but that people tend to err on the pessimistic side, and that people's expectations don't necessarily match up with reality. Yeah, I think that, I don't know, there are quite a few kind of popular publications that explore that same thing of how we're more negative about the world than we ought to be. But I think that's always quite an interesting learning, kind of to remind us that, like, we see a lot, we have a lot of negative media thrown in our faces, and we don't necessarily notice in what way the world is improving.
Right.
For me also, I think one interesting thing is that the score was sort of, you know, look at planet, you look at profits and look at people, but actually there's also kind of a lot of interaction between those. So kind of treating it separately felt a bit, I don't know. So I would be interested, what are the overlaps between those three different rankings, and how can that be more integrated?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to be curious, like, about how well they, you know, how well they load together on the dimensions, how well they, what the correlations are, and the predictability. There's also measures out there, statistical measures that I'm looking at doing. Chris Rump, who's working with me on this, is around how good they are at like you can literally get a measure of how good they are at actually measuring what they measure. And I'm not quite sure how that works yet. I haven't learned that particular technique or procedure, but he was talking about that. And so, you know, look at those kinds of things too. And Anna, you could be a part, and you can be a part of that if you want to. You can say, hey, I'd like to be a part of that team looking at that. You can join us.
Yeah, also I guess also interesting would be how good they are in predicting things, you know, because that might be quite relevant to then sort of counteract against things, you know, if you with the planet thing, if there's something that you can make, you know, five years forward, if you can use the indices for that, for sort of on the prediction level, that would be quite clever as well.
Yeah, that's good. I'm just sending okay, I think we'll give them 2 minutes and we'll come back. I told them 2 minutes and then we'll come back.
I'm just
Yeah.
going to.
Yeah.
All
right.
And I was just thinking about the impact of COVID, because it was in 2020 reporting on 21 reporting on, well, getting data from 2020, which was like the height of the COVID, and that must have had a massive impact.
Yeah, they were talking, all the
people...
reports talked a lot about COVID and recovery and what COVID did and how it impacted things. It was, yes, definitely. And they, some of them, you know, they're still reporting with their lens of 2021, right? The reports are coming out in 2021, yet the data is from 2020. So they can't change what's happening in 2021 still even, but they're doing their best to report on that. Yeah, cool. Well, I think, Emily, you can go ahead and bring them on back. And it'll give them 60 seconds to come back, which will be fine. And then we can jump into the next thing. Hey, David.
Wow, I had a great discussion with Tanya.
Awesome. So that'd be
Germany.
great. Could you, yeah, you know, what would be great is in the chat for everybody. If you all could, one person just put a little summary of maybe what you discussed in the chat and what questions came up for you. If you could do that, that's helping to catalog and for me to be connected with you all. And David, could you, while people are typing in, it's not a chatterfall, just freely type in some thoughts from questions that came up, suggestions, and those things in the chat, if you all could do that. And David, if you could also, as everybody's coming back right now, just say, welcome back, everybody. And if you could, if you could type into the chat just a little bit of a summary of what you talked about, what questions came up, what suggestions you had. And then I'd like to open it up for some live conversation and reflections. And we'll start with my buddy Dave Fearon, who has a wonderful podcast on practice.
On practice, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tanya and I, she tried very hard to keep me from weeping. I was so gloomy and I couldn't believe it. I usually am pretty upbeat about the future of humanity, but I found myself sinking very much into the possibility that it's managerial leaders themselves around the world who have a lot of the future in hand, whether they can hold on to it or not, and that their outlook for themselves and for their organizations and ultimately the networks of organizations is very important. And if I, a management educator, am gloomy, then perhaps they are too. And perhaps they're going to need research that bolsters their confidence that, yes, we can make enough changes organizationally and finally globally that we can move that dial up toward the green. And Tanya's much younger and much more optimistic, but noted that her sons in Germany are not yet as aware of global change as the words say that it is. And maybe that's also kind of a hopeful thing too, because they're taking care of their present, and that's what they should be doing. Tanya, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I like this conversation and this global and also from different angles, different perspective, different experience, but still from this universal perspective and your role as an educator and how to inspire the next generation and empower them, even though we are a bit gloomy, as you said, but still we have no other chance, but to see the hope and to empower them. And yeah, that I really enjoyed the chat with you, Dave, on that.
Thank you.
Really
He's wonderful to talk with.
I
Great.
did too.
So others, I would like to open up with anybody, just unmute and pop in. And if you could share with us your thoughts, and if you all would be willing, please put down some key points from your conversation that you think would be helpful as we reflect on this later. Again, this will be helpful as we continue to try to make this useful and help this to be representative of your wisdom for how best to present it. So please, in the chat, share with me just a summary of your conversation questions or what you're hearing. Would anybody like to pop in live here and share with us your thoughts from your conversation?
The conversation in my room was very interesting. It came out we are in a tipping point, and it's also important to change perspective from the individual to a broader perspective. Personally, I realized I was not able to give a vote to the planet or to humanity, because I think at the same time, someone and something is growing up very much and some other things doesn't work at all. So maybe I think everyone is in front, we are all in front of a choice if to survive or not. And everyone has to make a choice today, including world leaders, of course, starting from them maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Alessandro. Alessandro, where you're in Rome?
Yeah, I'm in Rome. Yeah.
Awesome. If I ever come to visit Rome, it's on my bucket list to come visit sometime. Hopefully we can
great.
Say hi. Like I said, I'll be in Europe with our doctoral students this summer. And what do you tell a little bit? What do you do? What's your work?
I'm a musician, but with very broad interest, duties, and goals.
Yeah, great, awesome. What is your instrument? What is your
this baby behind me?
Awesome. There you go. That's beautiful. Well, thanks for being here. Awesome. So, anybody else want to share with us a little bit more? That would be helpful.
So this is Shystar, and I think I was in a group with 4 other friends, Ute, Megan, I don't remember other names, I apologize. If I'm forgetting you, please, you can unmute yourself and sort of fill in what I missed. I think we were surprised by, first and foremost, the people score was so high. And then the overall score was what it was. And the questions that I had, and we dwelled on it for a little bit, is really, how do you define humanity? Because it really does have an impact on how we measure, how we assess the impact. It's like, if you look at the framework you use, people, planet, and profit, 2 reports for profit, 2 for planet, and 2 for people. And that is really going to determine the output as well. So what you put in is what you get out. Right. And I think from that perspective, the idea of defining humanity in a holistic way becomes important. And it, quite relatedly, is since we're looking at humanity, how do we ensure that the ideas we are incorporating are not Western, Eurocentric, but really include the entire humanity? For example, if you look at the happiness report, it's a very sort of Western understanding of what happiness is, and other communities may define it very differently. And also, the 3 categories that were used, dying, surviving, and thriving, they're very value laden, right? So how do we ensure that a project that looks at the entire humanity really includes the entire humanity? So we were curious and interested in looking at the 47 countries that were included in developing the score.
Awesome, thank you. That's really good thoughts. In general, again, this is all sort of not a blank sheet. I wanted to start with something for us to have to play with. So there's some form to it, enough to get your hands on it and to co-create. And so I welcome your comments, because I think all of those are really valid. And looking at the individual reports and what they did and how they addressed cultures and how they addressed economic level of countries and how they addressed representation and voice, and how that measure particularly acknowledges all those things that you talked about, the potentials for bias and those things. And I generally, when I looked at the reports and the people and the teams creating and what they reported on, I was pretty impressed, but I'm still think there's time to, I think we need to really look at this question that you said, but with a sensitivity to those kinds of things that you brought up, and where they were created and what the teams are, where their locations are, because the teams are, for the different reports, are located from different places in the world. Actually, like the World Happiness Report was started, trying to remember exact, I can't remember the country, but it was a group of people from a different government. I don't want to, maybe Bhutan, no, but a country, a certain government caused the initiation of that, for example. So it's good to go back and look at the history and look at those kinds of things. I agree. And then I think the label, dying, surviving, thriving, I just grabbed that out of the air, you know, and in one sense, trying to think of, like, I saw the measures kind of fitting into, you know, kind of between that 40, when I look at the low to high, look at the pattern over time, over 5 years, they kind of fall into that range. And so that's sort of fell out. And I think that's open for discussion as well as what's the right labels for that. For me personally, I would say that I think we're, as a planet, we are surviving as a planet. That my judgment, if I would say that's pretty accurate where we're at. And I think it's good because we're not dying. I would be really upset if it put us there, because I want to have some belief that we are moving in the right direction and that we can. And we obviously we're moving back a little bit, but not a lot. And so I think it provokes me to actually, the term thinking that we're surviving provokes me to say we can do better than that. And that if there are countries that are in the thriving range, what are they doing, right? What can we learn from those that are in that range? Because if there's an average, then there's those that are low and those that are higher above that. So you raised some really good points. So is it Shystar? Yeah, tell me, where are you and what do you do?
So I'm at George Washington University. I think I attended some of the earlier meetings as well related to Academy of Management. Okay. And I teach organizational change and leadership. I teach at the doctoral level as well as at the master's level. And my research previously focused on the impact of globalizations on individuals, organizations, and societies. And more recently, I'm studying inequalities and how people make sense of inequalities, and also decolonizing our perspective, our mindset. So
wow, that's really powerful. You know, I've traveled all through Africa a lot, and you really understand that piece about colonization, and at a level not like you do, but I got a sense of hearing it in the stories of people there, and you can see the layers. It's really interesting to see these layers. So thanks for all the work that you're doing. And I would love to talk with you later more. I'd love to connect you with our students in the doctoral program. They'd love to meet you. So maybe we could do something later if you don't mind. Could you send me an email or put it in the chat so that I would love to talk with you some more. Our students would love to meet you. Great. So anybody else want to share? I'm going to call on somebody from our program if I don't hear somebody from our program. I see a few here. They're going to like disappear. All of a sudden, all the students that are here, they'll be like, go away.
There's someone in the chat, Steve, Chris, who said, what I heard in my group, we think we heard people average was highest of the 3 Ps, which is hopeful for the future of humanity.
Yeah. And Chris is one of the group that's been working with it. Thank you, Chris, for so much of your work. Do you want to say more, Chris? And then we'll move on to the next. The next conversation is going to be a little bit more provocative than the first round, just so you all know. So hang tight. You're going to have to put your seatbelts on for the next round of conversation. Chris, you want to say hi? Hey, Chris.
I think I'm unmuted. Hello, everybody.
thank you, Chris, for all your help with the work on this. Chris has been a great thinking partner in this and the work that we're doing. So would you want to say a little bit more?
Yeah, I introduced myself to my group members as a colleague of yours and kind of weighing in on some of the statistics. I gave them a teaser of what's to come here in session 2, and they said they already heard it. Oh, so you already teased, I guess some of your students, you already told them kind of the punchline. So I won't say that again. I'll leave that surprise for the other people.
Yeah.
Let's see everyone here.
All right, cool. Well, let me just move on to the next. I think people are ready for that. And let's go to the next thing. I'm just going to look here. I'm trying to find where this here. Okay. So round 2, we're going to look at the individual country rankings. And what I'm going to look at is the country rankings on their overall score, and then the change over 5 years. And then we'll go into small group discussion. So in the chat, what I'd like you to do is, if the humanities score is at 62.33, in the chat, don't hit enter, Chatterfall. What do you think is the country with that rated number 1? And what country rated number 46? I think we're at 46. So who rated 46? Who rated number 1? And just go ahead and put that in the chat without hitting enter. What do you think? Okay, 3, 2, 1, bang, hit enter. Okay. We have number 1 was 75.35, and 46 was 48.89. There we go. Sweden was at 75.35, and Algeria was at 48.89. Now I can show you the scores and the rankings there. You can see the top 10, the bottom 10. And as we go, we'll be able to create reports that are like, the radar. Are you familiar with radar graphs, where it shows the 3 dimensions and it can show where they are? We can do that kind of stuff on the People, Planet, Profit. We can do different stuff like that. I'm keeping it simple today, but we have the numbers to be able to report that. That's the top. Now,
Where's the US? I don't see the US.
Yeah, because they're in the middle. They're right around, I think the US is around right around 30, right below Brazil, like 36. It might be closer. It might be right in the middle, I think.
Wow.
Let me look here real quick. I'm looking at my chart here. So a quick reaction. What are your reactions to what you're seeing there in the chat? Just type it in, no Chatterfall, just type it in. I'm going to look up anybody. Let me go in here.
I thought it was 28, but I'm remembering from a couple days ago.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. So
maybe it's 36. It's either 28 or 36.
28. It was 28. It was 28. 61.79. UK, you got UK, right? You got the UK, right? 5. If anybody has any questions, I can show, but I'm looking at the ranking here in my spreadsheet here. Okay. Yeah, some people, my friends at the Tavistock Institute, when I shared the results with them, a few of my research friends said, "I'm surprised UK is so high." That's what someone said in the chat. So, all right. So next, you ready for the next one? This is hey, can you all put your seatbelts on? If you wear seatbelts or like to wear seatbelts, I think you should for this next one. You might hit your nose on the screen in front of you if you're not careful. So this is what it looks like. This is not the next one. We're getting there, but this is the heat map. You can see kind of where the countries all lie in there. And there's the people score, profit score, and state planet score. Okay. Now let's look at change between 2016 and 2021. So in the chat, and I'd like you to put in there, let's do Chatterfall. I'm curious. In the chat, what countries had the most what country had the most positive change and what country had the most negative change between 2016 and 2021? (2016 and 2021), remembering the data is from the previous year and the report comes out in the following year. 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Boom. Okay, you all ready? The highest was positive change of 6.16. The lowest was a negative 6.41. And there you go. Ukraine by far had the most positive change, and the USA had the most negative change. This is what it looks like.
I bumped my nose on my screen. That's awful.
Now, there are some things that we'll be looking at as we get the 22 report and 2023 report, because I'll be working on all three. I'll be putting out 3 reports to sort of give a sense of this. So it's really 3. This is again 21. And we just got all the data for 22, and 23 comes out during 23. So we're waiting on those. What I'll tell you, Dave, is that the U.S. since 2021 has made like dramatic improvements since 21. So we had a huge drop during those 4 years, huge drop. And then we've had a huge shift positive. We could, I don't know, it could be even that we are one of the top 3 positive change countries between 2016 and 2021, just so you know. But I have to look, I have to get that data. Okay. All right. So we're going to go to breakouts for 5 minutes and have a chat about what did you hear so far? What are your reactions and what questions you have? You'll meet some new people. So for those of you that are sort of here on the side, if you all hear me, please join the room. Some of you are here and have this may be on the side while you're doing some other work. Please try to join a room. And we'll go ahead and open up the rooms, go for 5 minutes, have a check-in. We might move you around. Emily, you might need to move people. If somebody doesn't show up in the room, just switch them over and you might get shifted around. So we have a group of people in each of the rooms. So if you could go now and have a little chat. Yeah, it looks good. Looks like people are showing up in the rooms. That's good. There we go. Yeah, that's good. It works good, Emily. All right. Coyote, do you know how to join one of the rooms? Cool. And Yisham, I'm not sure if you're able to. You can join us in this conversation, Yisham, happy to. If anybody doesn't want to go to, we have enough in rooms, you can stay here and join us in the conversation here, no problem. Okay, so Anna, you have to give me your quantitative brain analysis.
Yeah, well, no, I think firstly, I'm just really seeing the countries listed in an order was just really interesting, especially like as other people were saying that all the European countries were sort of like, top performing, which makes me a bit like, I don't know how I feel about that, because obviously I'm from Germany and it was quite high, but I don't think we're performing that well. So it's a bit like,
Right, and if you look at the scores, the individual scores, if you're in that, if I go up here to up here to this index, if you look here, while you might be kind of high, you're at the low end of thriving or at the high end of surviving. So
Yeah.
while you're doing well, right, you got lots of room to improve.
Yeah, actually the range wasn't that, what was the range between the lowest and the highest? It wasn't actually that large, right? It was
Right
most,
here.
yeah. So I mean,
So you can see that the 1 through 8, there are 8 countries in the thriving range. All other countries are in the surviving range. Germany is surviving, on the border of surviving to thriving.
okay.
Ireland, Brazil, it's way down there. But if you go in and I'm looking here, Ireland, in this order, 12 is Australia, Lithuania, Japan is 14, Estonia, Australia, Belgium, France, 65, 66, 60, the United States is 61, is at 29, so what you're looking at is a lot of countries are in the surviving range. They're in the upper side, the positive side of surviving, and those that are on the lower side of surviving, you get into Poland is right in the center, Hungary right in the center, and then Greece is on the lower side of surviving, China, Thailand, Morocco, and so forth. However, when you look at positive change, what's interesting is if you look at the positive change score, you can see China is one of the countries that made a really positive change during those years. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that, because I personally have not had a positive opinion about how oriented China has been towards some of those types of measures, which is, it speaks good for them. And you can see Japan, and so some of the countries that are in the surviving range are making positive increases.
Yeah, but actually quite slow if this is over 5 years. I mean, in terms of the, it's not, I don't know if it would be even statistically significant if it's just, increasing from 70 to 72.
I think that's a good question. I think I think we'll have to address that. I'm not sure. I think these nuanced changes, if we're moving in the right direction, and if there's a trend in the right direction, then where will we be in 50 years, right? As long as we create conditions to continuously and positively be trending in the right direction, even no matter how small, over time, it makes a difference. It's like eating healthy every day, right? It's like,
yeah,
if I eat healthy just today, this week is not going to change my health, my heart health, right? So, yeah, and so I think that's interesting. I also think I'm curious, why do you think it is Ukraine
yeah. I had the
so
same question.
positive? And what do you think? What are your thoughts on? I'm gonna put Emily on the spot. Yeah, Rachel has a thought there. Yeah.
Just a minute. Yeah, I was just thinking about Ukraine. They've been kind of encouraged by the West to become, want to join NATO, want to join the European Union. So they're kind of been, over those 5 years, I get the impression, I don't really know very much about this, but there's been a kind of concerted effort to woo them by the West. So that might affect how they've been. And also there must have been a regime change, because the new Zelensky came in, and that might have boosted them.
Yeah, what's really interesting is when you look at the individual reports, Rachel, and you look at how they calculated the scores and the dimensions that go into it, it's pretty robust, the things that they're looking at. They're not looking at opinions like necessarily. The World Happiness Report uses a scale that looks at kind of they call it dysphoria, but it's a scale. It's like, imagine a perfect life, and if 0 is the worst and the 10 is the best, most amazing life you could have, how would you rate your life right now, right? And but they also calculate it. They also look at it within the context of like 7 different measures that are concrete measures, and they try to discuss like the relationship between those. But then, you look at the Human Development Index. It has been around for 30 years. It looks at a variety of measures, life expectancy, and gender equality and education levels and those kinds of things. And then so you can go and look at the different measures, and they're pretty interesting. The collection of measures that if you collapse them into each composite and then you collapse them into this meta mashup that we have here, it's really interesting to think, what does that represent, you know? So yeah. So yeah, we told him to come back in about 2 minutes. Emily, you can go ahead and click come on back. I'll give them a minute to come back, and then we'll jump in.
Are you going to be making a mega report, Steve? Is that
Yes,
what's going to happen?
yeah. A meta.
Well, that would be great to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be called the Future of Humanity Report 2021. I'll put out 2022, and then I'll put out 2023. So there'll be 3 reports, and I might even go back and have, if time permits, go backwards and do a 2019 report and a 2018 report and a 2016 report, you know, and then people can look at them over time. And so the intention will be to do something like that. And it'll be a series. So I'll be putting that out over time here. What's really interesting is, Rachel, is what's fascinating is the report, the critical reflections that they write up, each of the 6 reports. There's so much amazing comments and recommendations and assessments on what's driving things, and you know, and so forth. So that is going to take some time. I'm really working in the midst of that. That'll be the 3rd round of conversation that we're going to have, is going to be around that. So I don't want to put my dear friend Frances on the spot, but if Frances wants to share with us her thoughts, that would be welcome. Let me see if Frances wants to. It would be great to hear from you, Frances, whenever you're ready.
Well, working backward, I've been in 2 groups now, and first I'll start with the insight of learning about Ukraine, the irony of it, seeing that Ukraine had made the most progress. I sarcastically said, and look how they were rewarded for it. But I think there were no big surprises in the rankings, because when you look at news stories about the best place to live and the way humanity is defined in such a story or report, and the way it may have been defined in your study, whoever, it could be very, very similar. And that's where it ends. So to me, even without having very, very specific definition and even working definition of all of the terms that were used, there was no big surprises of where the rankings were. I especially wasn't surprised about the United States, and for the same reason that the people I spoke to in the UK were a little bit surprised, and it's because of our living experience, regardless of what profiles you were measuring. So, and I would just say, one of the things that I have brought to each of my discussions is, in reality, there's such a thing as dominance, a fight for being a dominating power. And I can imagine if you were saying, if you can be a dominating power and humane at the same time, where countries would measure, because I think that's a very realistic factor to be considered.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. 2 things pop up for me. I don't want to forget them. One is the crab syndrome, and the second is this notion of power. And that notion that to have power and to use it justly is the definition, I think, of wisdom. If for someone to argue we are just and wise because we don't have power is not the point. I think to be strong and to use it wisely and to use it justly is important. And I think what you're talking about, Frances, is what Michelle Brodke on our team said similarly to you when you said, look at how they got rewarded. She said, you know, it's kind of interesting if you look at that at Ukraine. She said, it's interesting to note that maybe you want to look at countries that are doing really well and look at the countries on their borders and look at the current relations between the countries to see what might need to be done to help ensure that countries don't get at odds with each other because one is doing better and the other maybe not, maybe lagging behind. And maybe there's something to be said there in terms of why Russia attacked Ukraine in terms of keeping weak borders.
You know, but you say that from a place of goodwill, and I think that's what I'm challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's goodwill. It's goodwill operating here around what may be rational and what may bring humanity to a larger part of the world.
Yeah. Another dear friend of mine, she's a professor at the University of Bahamas. And she said, Steve, and I was visiting there one time for a conference, she said, you know, what's interesting, we have this concept called the crab syndrome. When we go out crabbing in the Bahamas, you can take a bucket and you can put it down on the ground and you can grab crab. And as you catch crabs, you can throw them in the bucket and they never jump out. They never get out. You never worry about putting a top on it. Never. Because when you put them in, as one begins to climb out, the others grab it and pull it down in and never let that one get out. And so she said, we often challenge each other here to watch as people are doing better. What do we do with those around us? You know, so there's something to be said around how we handle all of us collectively as a planet doing better. How do we help each other and how do we support each other? So anybody have anything else they want to share or any thoughts? If you could put in the chat some reflections and thoughts from your group, that would be helpful again from your breakout. Anybody want to chime in live?
I would like to say something. I'm Sandra, I'm from Brazil.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Steve. I'm not talking about the group, but a question I have. Brazil is in number 37, I guess, among 47 countries. Is it correct?
I'm looking right now.
And my question is, I don't know if we are dying. I was surprised and impacted with
so
this.
Brazil is, and then remember, Sandra, this is from 2021, which is data from 2020, right?
Okay.
And what has a big impact here on the scores here is this planet score, which looks at peace and looks at climate change, right? And if you look at the other scores, so what's happening here is you can kind of see how, and you can go look at how the climate competitive index calculates its score, and you can look at the peace index and kind of see its impact. And where you are, where we look up here, the way this thing here, we put it in this range here, and and where Brazil is at 54. Yeah, 54.63. So kind of on the middle of the lower side on surviving. So it's subjective, right? Would you say, as this is your home country, would you say that you believe that you all are surviving and have room for improvement, or would you say you would put yourself at a different place? In 2020,
yeah, I guess
21.
I think, yes. I could say that we are, my personal feeling is that we are surviving. More than diving. I thought it was diving, and I would like to understand what does it mean, dying and surviving. What do you mean with that? And you answered. We have to consider aspects from environment and profit and people.
Right.
And Brazilians were considered the most anxious people in the world, according to a survey. I'm not sure exactly the source, but
I think it was the World Happiness Report reported on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. And what do you do in Brazil? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm a psychologist, but I work with people through coaching and mentoring. And my goal is to integrate personal life and work.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you, Sandra. Anybody have anything else before we move to round 3 of the conversation?
So someone in the chat, Irene, had a question. She asked, was there a COVID pandemic metric given 2020?
Interesting. I don't know if there was a metric. There were some metrics that were mentioned in the reports, which I'll be talking about next, which they talked about the death rate, how many people died, the number of people that were saved. I think the number is 20 million people's lives were saved from the vaccine. They were able to calculate that. And they talked about the number of deaths and the month. Then they also did calculations around, you can see calculations on the number of unwarranted deaths. They talked about the inequality in access to vaccines. And they talked about countries, and they talked about sometimes also countries that were smaller or island countries. And they talked about what were the practices that had the most impact and which countries had the most success, and so forth. So the reports shed a lot of light on that, the critical reflections, which is the next round. But that those are some of the things that that came up around the pandemic, but it was mentioned a lot in the reports. So I'm going to go, let me see, I'm just trying to find out where we're at now. We're right here. Round
Joe,
3.
Sorry.
Yeah, go,
Joe
yeah, sure.
Also has a question.
Who was that?
If we have another moment, I know you're trying to get to round 3. Shall I, or?
Yeah, sure, Joe. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you for the talk. I've had to step in and out. I'm working in my regular work, but I wanted to bring out the group relations kind of concept of really representation and the notion of subgroups working on behalf of the larger group. I really appreciate the granularity at looking at these things very regional or by country, but I'm also thinking about how countries work on behalf of the whole. I mean, one example, this is just an example, is the United States, for example, has allowed Ukraine to defend itself. It's this notion of, but that really Europe and Ukraine in particular probably couldn't have the military resources to defend itself. And so it's how a country gets mobilized, maybe literally in this case, to work on behalf of a larger region and other parts of the whole, Europe and Ukraine in this example. I wish it wasn't the case that my country was used in that way, but it is often how we're used.
Yeah, I hear you, Joe. And I think these are the things we want to explore and have open, have conversation around, and have the keep having the conversation. There's a whole old adage that, when conversation ends, war begins. And I think no matter how tough the conversation, as long as we keep talking about it, keep pushing. And I love pushing edges, Joe. So help if, as you see more, give comments. If you want to chat offline or with me, that would be really welcomed. I'd appreciate that. So I'll jump into the next round, which is it's the roughest of the 3 because I'm learning how to do qualitative document analysis, and I'm learning how to look at these amazing reports. And a lot of times I'm amazed. So probably, I don't know if any of you read any of the reports, and it's from just 2021. These reports are every year. Go look at just one of the indices, look at one of them, look at their report, look at the thought that went into it. They do it, they produce it, and it kind of sits on a shelf or a digital shelf, and some people read it, and it's amazing, the care, thought, and critical reflection that are put into the reports. So I'm hoping that by doing this work, it helps to bring that wisdom forward and help it to have more life and to be more useful and continue to draw people back to them. I see where Chris was sharing the link to the World Happiness Report and the chapters that might be interesting for Sandra to take a look at, those kinds of things. So I've begun the process. So this is really rough, but it's just to give you a sense of the kinds of ways that I might, and you might try to analyze the reports, and you might have categories. Hey, think about this theme, think about this category of theming, and so forth. So qualitative document analysis, it's formal research, and it looks at reports similar to interviews for transcripts of a focus group or an interview where you do qualitative analysis of the interviews. This is a similar process to that. You're looking at the reports. And the quotes, I took a quote that I wanted to pull. I just pulled a select quote from each report for each of the 3 dimensions. So in the people area, human development report, I pulled them out because I thought they said something, but there is no more than that, other than I felt they said something that they cared about in their report. Human development, from the human development report, they say human development not just as a goal, but as a means to a path forward in uncertain times, reminding us that people, in all our complexity, all our diversity, all our creativity, are the real wealth of nations. That's from the human development report. In the next one here, let me see here. I have got stuff in front of my screen, so you're gonna have to bear with me. I can't see it because I have the camera right in front of the screen, so I can, but it probably worse. So we present new evidence on the power of expected benevolence as measured by the extent to which people think their lost wallet would be returned if found by neighbors, strangers, or the police. To return a wallet requires a level of benevolence extending far beyond basic trustworthiness, since the finder has to go out of their way, often at considerable effort, to do a good turn for someone else. It is no surprise that people are happier if they live in a community where others stand ready to help. In the profit category, we have Index of Economic Freedom and the Global Innovation Index. And a quote from the profit one is, economic freedom is about much more than a business environment in which entrepreneurship and prosperity can flourish. With its far-reaching impacts on various aspects of human development, economic freedom empowers people, unleashes powerful forces of choice and opportunity, nourishes other liberties, and improves the overall quality of life. The Global Innovation Index, a quote here, is, it is likely that innovation divides will be accentuated in the coming years across economies, sectors, and companies. Innovation, ecosystems, and many emerging economies have become fragile and will need to be supported by targeted policies, while sectors such as ICT, software, pharmaceuticals have increased spending on R&D in 2020. Others, such as hospitality, automobiles, have reduced their R&D investments over the same time period. This imbalance will need to be corrected, as the future winners in all sectors will have to be innovative in terms of both new technologies and business models. So that's profit. And planet. The climate crisis is an existential threat to life on Earth. To reduce the magnitude of the crisis impacts, we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius as decided in the Paris Agreement. Only decisive action will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which are responsible for climate change. The Peace Index. The pillars of positive peace interact systematically to support a society's attitudes, institutions, and structures that underpin development and peace building. High levels of positive peace occur where attitudes make violence less tolerated, institutions are resilient and more responsive to society's needs, and structures create an environment for the nonviolent resolution of grievances. So the current state, and I'm going to wrap up here, we're at 9:24, and we're going to have an opportunity to have some reflections in the chat if you have reflections, parting wisdom. But I'm going to review the current state, hope, and some recommendations. And again, please know these are not well-themed. These are not established strong recommendations or things. These are just some quick ones to give you a sense of the first kind of pass at looking at the content. So Peace Index, the world is considerably less peaceful now than it was in 2008, with an average level of country peacefulness deteriorating by 2% over the last decade. Peacefulness has declined year on year for the 9 of the last 13 years. So some common themes across all the reports are change and disruption was mentioned a lot. COVID is top of mind. It seems that the trends are not dropping dramatically, but there is all the reports, most of them to some degree saying that some decreases. The climate one talked about how during COVID, climate got better a little bit because of certain characteristics that happened during COVID and lockdowns and things like that. However, they said we got to be careful. And so they were talking about that in terms of a bounce back. Polarization, insecurity, increased violence, resilience is emerging. They talked a lot of the reports talked about resilient people, resilient countries, and a resilience that seemed to be emerged through all of COVID. Technology is important, and its importance is emerging. Mental health issues, a lot of emphasis that we need to really look at this notion of looking at the balance, the people, planet, and profit, really looking at the people side and looking at the emotions, looking at the human nature, looking at the social and behavioral sciences, and looking at that in addition to structural changes and looking at purely from what they say here, a government policy perspective. So again, please note, these are just some initial reflections. Hope for the future. Now let us imagine the reverse. What our nations, our planet would look like if we expanded human development, including people's agency and freedoms. That would be a world where our creativity is unleashed to reimagine our futures, to renew and adapt our institutions, to craft new stories about who we are and what we value. It would not be just a nice to have. It would be a must have when the world is in ongoing unpredictable flux. And you can see some of the themes there around resilience and greater well-being and better health and more freedom and greater income and healthy environments, increased education and less conflict and those kinds of things for the future. And there is promise and peril and uncertainty. Tipping the scales toward promise is up to us. But how do we do this? And some recommendations. And, you got now imagine the reverse again, but really think about the recommendations for this notion of this unleashed and reimagined our futures around some recommendations from don't spend out of the pandemic. Don't have this mindset to spend our way out, to spend a lot of money just to get out of it. Be careful with that. You can see things from fighting corruption to being transparent to innovating to situate low carbon investment at the center of recovery efforts, to focus on long-term goals of Paris Agreement, to promote nonviolent resolutions, to take a balanced approach, those kinds of things. And again, this is just a quick pass looking and doing a good qualitative document analysis should hopefully bring up some really good themes. So with that, I think it's time. We're not going to go to the breakouts. We're just going to say thank you. It's time to end. Could you in the chat put your one takeaway? I would welcome. What's the one thing you take away, or what's the one recommendation, or what's your recommendation and a takeaway? Could you give me some parting words of wisdom and share with our team and us? And if you want to be a part of this, you have a chance to also be a part of what we're doing. Reach out to me, reach out to the Tavistock Institute. We'll be sending the recording out. I'll be sending the report out if you want to get the report once we get it written, which will be going over the course of the spring. So I'll turn it back over to Emily. Emily, you want to close us out, or is it Anna, if you want to?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much, Stephen, for this really, really fascinating talk and the very engaging way of delivering this. I think that we all really enjoyed being part of the discussion and being part of what will happen next. So thank you very much. And thank you for everyone to join this discussion. And just to say, we have these spaces happening once a month. So the next one is on the 15th of March, again at 1 p.m. with the title, Is There a Doctor in the House? So please feel free to join us for that as well. And thank you again, Steve. And I think we're all looking forward to the report that I know you will be busy writing.
Yeah, thank you.